Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to join us as we do the Automox Patch Tuesday breakdown for August 2020. We will be doing a presentation demo, Q&A, and a little giveaway at the end. I see some really familiar names in there in the attendee list. Welcome back if you've attended this before. If this is your first time, welcome. We're excited to have you here. Who are we? Let's go ahead and do some introductions real quick. On the left, you've got myself, Richard Melick. I am the Senior Technical Product Manager here at Automox. To my proverbial right, Nick. Nick, say hello to the beautiful people.
Hello, beautiful people.
And what do you do for us, Nick?
I run the online community for Automox and dabble in a bunch of things like working on worklets and scripts.
Awesome, awesome. Nick's going to be providing the demo. He's going to be my DJ as I wrap along in this presentation. So stick along. He'll also be answering the highly technical questions that you all throw at us. Speaking of questions, go over some housekeeping rules in this one. To start out, we're going to keep everyone muted to keep the audio clear. This is being recorded though, so if for some reason you have to drop off, you're going to still receive a link to the recording of this webinar at the very end. We will be doing a Q&A at the end of this. Now, with that in mind, even though the Q&A is at the end, please take the opportunity to ask questions through the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we'll address as many of them as we can before we run out of time. So even if you have a question during the presentation, just go ahead and throw it in there. If it's not something that we can address right at that point, we will address it at the end. The agenda today, we're going to be talking about some of the big news that's coming out. Microsoft and the new normal, of course. Netlogon, CVSS, got upgraded late last night. We'll talk about what that means for you and how that's going to be impacting your patching. We've got 2 exploited, but only 1 0-day to kind of go over. Adobe's got a laundry list of patches to cover, as well as there's a little bit of a Firefox bit in there that happened about 2 weeks ago, and then finally Nick is going to be doing a worklet demo. He'll describe what a worklet is for those of you that aren't familiar, and how that's going to how you can automate the removal of disconnected devices from the Automox console. Finally, we'll do the questions and answers, and then at the end, we'll be doing the giveaway. Now, what does that mean? First off, this is the cool prize that we're going to be giving away. It's a CanaKit Raspberry Pi 4 4GB starter kit. It's including the 1.5 gigahertz 64-bit quad-core ARM V8 CPU, 32 gig Samsung Evo micro SD, a case and a power supply with a noise filter, and a bunch of just other little things that you see here in the picture. I want to give that away to one lucky attendee. Now, in order to get that prize, you got to stay till the end. We're going to be taking everybody's name during the Q&A. We'll be doing a randomizer, and I will be announcing that at the end of this presentation. So that's just the rule of the game. Hopefully one of you gets really excited when they win. So let's get into the what's going on. This month's Patch Tuesday release from Microsoft included fixes for 120 vulnerabilities, including two vulnerabilities that had been exploited. One of them, which is a 0-day. One of the 0 days, CVE 2020-1380. As well as an already exploited but publicly known vulnerability, have been exploited in the wild, but they're not the only vulnerability to be of concern this month. In total, there are 17 critical vulnerabilities being patched by Microsoft in August, and this month's patch update showcases that CVSS rating isn't the end-all, be-all of patching, as one of this month's exploited vulnerabilities is rated important, not critical. It's kind of an interesting little storyline. Any vulnerability can be exploited. That's something to keep in mind. If it's an exploited, it potentially could be the gateway in. For August as well, Adobe has released fixes for Lightroom, Acrobat, and Reader. And additionally, Adobe released a number of out-of-band patches throughout July, highlighting the importance of keeping a close eye on your patch status. It is important to note that Adobe releases patches every single week in July. Many of which came after the July Patch Tuesday. So if you're just now starting to look at your Adobe patches and getting those out, you've got some that you need to go back and look at for the past couple of weeks. Overall, August is going to be another busy month for sysadmins and sec operations teams like you. Heavy patch loads are the new normal though, and that's all thanks to this expanding corporate attack surface. As we all know, many organizations are now securing all their kinds of digital environment, as well as approaching this unique challenge in the increasingly remote world. When devices are on-premise, corporate infrastructure provides an array of security tools that help protect your networks from these potential threats. It's a security ring, right? But now that there's remote devices, they tend to exist outside the corporate safety net and are particularly vulnerable. And for this reason, you need to be ensuring that remote devices are being patched quickly and regularly. And that should be part of your key managing remote endpoint policy. This is going to be for the long term. So let's go ahead and get started on the Microsoft stuff. I think this is a really interesting news cycle. Now, as I said before, Microsoft released a total of 120 patches, 17 of which are rated critical. Services across all of Microsoft were impacted, mainly focused on productivity tools and media consumption. Let's hit on a few ones that really stood out to us. CVE 2020-1555 and 1570 are similar to one of the month's zero-day vulnerabilities with 1380, which we'll go into in the next couple of slides. However, these vulnerabilities have not been exploited in the wild. 1570 is a remote code execution vulnerability seen in Internet Explorer, while 1555 impacts the same services but on Microsoft Edge. Another critical vulnerability getting addressed this month is CVE 2020-1483, which impacts Microsoft Outlook and can be exploited through email or web-based attack scenarios. Now, a successful exploitation could allow an attacker to run an arbitrary code within the context of the current user. Basically, that would allow the attacker to steal data, run backdoor installations, or even engage in lateral movement across the network. Remember, as soon as somebody is in one of your endpoints, they have access to everything. Now, CVE 2020-1560, 1574, and 1585 are all critical memory corruption bugs that impact Windows codec library and can lead to arbitrary code execution as well. And these are remote code execution vulnerabilities. I'm sorry, there's also a remote code execution vulnerability in the Windows Media Audio Codec, and that's under CVE 2020-1339. Successful exploitation of this vulnerability can allow an attack to seize control of the victim machine. And that would give them, if that victim machine has a user that has admin access, they now have admin access as well. Critical remote code vulnerability, CVE 2020-1046, is a .NET framework vulnerability, and it's also getting addressed this month. Like all the other RCEs or remote code execution vulnerabilities, 1046 potentially allows attackers to gain access to the critical data on the endpoint, as well as gain lateral movement across the network. A remote code execution vulnerability found in the MS Microsoft HTML engine, CVE 2020-1567, is getting patched this month too. Finally, there's a bevy of memory corruption vulnerabilities found in the Windows Media Foundation being patched for August. CVE 2020-1525, 1379, 1477, 1492, 1554 can be exploited in a variety of ways, such as tricking users into visiting malicious websites or opening malicious documents. Now, this is not a new form of attack. A lot of these things that we're talking about are not new areas of attack. They're successful for a reason. And nowadays, now that your users are outside your corporate network, now that your users are remote and they're on their own networks at home, they're even more vulnerable because they're receiving files from their coworkers. They're going to websites, maybe to take care of a little banking or taking a little bit of their lunchtime to browse around. Whatever it might be, the likelihood that they're going to be opening something or visiting a malicious website has increased because those corporate protections aren't there. Now, with that kind of attack, if successful, a malicious player can use these vulnerabilities to create new user accounts, view or change data, or even install programs. Microsoft has addressed this issue by correcting how Windows Media Foundation handles objects in memory. Okay, something happened last night that was kind of interesting. We're going to talk about NETLOG and CVSS specifically. Now, this is a remote code execution vulnerability that, This is a critical elevation and privilege vulnerability, not a remote code execution vulnerability. This is a critical elevation and privilege vulnerability found in the NetLogon process on Windows Server. And it's earned an upgrade late last night from CVSS 8.3 to 10. That's a big change. And the reason is because of how critical it needs to be addressed today. And they're saying it's critical because it's going to be rolled out in two parts. First, let's talk about what this vulnerability is. The NetLogon authenticates users and services within a domain that runs continuously in the background on Windows Server devices. An elevation of privilege vulnerability is a flaw or configuration oversight that allows an application to gain elevated access to resources that are not normally available or protected from the application. This allows the application to perform unauthorized actions. Now, this vulnerability could allow an exploit that leverages the always-on NetLogon process. An attacker could use this vulnerability to elevate process privileges, allowing the attacker to steal credentials or sensitive data, download additional malware to the endpoint or server, and execute malicious code. The risk of having a process vulnerability like NetLogon is that it is not an application, but instead an always-on process for attackers to exploit. Now, with August Patch Tuesday, they've addressed it with CVE 2020-1472, the first part. The second part is going to roll out in Q1 of 2021. I definitely wrote that wrong on the slide, but it's 2021 with the next big Microsoft Windows Server update. So they will give more information coming up into that point. Right now, it has not been exploited, but it did earn that upgrade from 8.3 to 10. So please definitely, if you're running Microsoft Windows Server, take a look and make sure that this is being patched, at least phase 1. Okay, let's talk about the big ones for this month. Microsoft has released a patch for a critical zero-day vulnerability, CVE 2020-1380. This is a remote code execution vulnerability that has already been reported as being exploited in the wild. It's specifically targeting the Internet Explorer rendering engine in Microsoft Office or Internet Explorer, and a successful attack would allow malicious players to gain rights within the context of the current user. There are multiple ways an attacker can seek to exploit this vulnerability, such as tricking users into visiting a malicious website or opening an email. As I've mentioned this before, this is a tried and true method attack, and 1380 is especially concerning for the remote workforce due to the lack of corporate infrastructure and safety nets that come with it. Essentially is making the endpoints an easy target. Microsoft has also released a patch for a second zero-day threat this month, CVE 2020-1464, which is a spoofing vulnerability. With a rating of 5.3, this is the kind of vulnerability that may not make the priority list for overworked sysadmins like yourself. But as the reports of exploitation show, even vulnerabilities with lower CVSS ratings can still be a significant threat to an organization's security. Both legacy and newer versions of Windows and Windows servers have been reportedly been victims of this vulnerability as well. Attackers can seek to exploit CVE 2020-1464 by using a spoof signature attached to a malicious file, allowing them to bypass security features and load malicious files. This spoofing vulnerability has been reported exploited in both, I'm sorry, I repeated that myself. The fact that this has been reported and exploited in both legacy and newer versions of the Windows and Windows Server is worrisome because 25% of the Windows devices still connected to the web are Windows 7. Using a spoof signature attached to a malicious executable, an attacker can take advantage of this vulnerability, allowing them to load any file and trick Windows into trusting it because they see it as legit and trusted source. So definitely take the opportunity, start patching these today. 24 hours from point of notification is definitely the best practice in this case. It's a lot to take in, right? Let's talk about Adobe then. For August, Adobe has released a total of 26 updates addressing vulnerabilities in Lightroom, Acrobat, and Reader. Of these, 11 were rated critical because they allow attackers to bypass security features or to execute remote code. However, these may not be the only updates that sysadmins need to be concerned about. In July alone, Adobe delivered 19 security vulnerability patches, 7 of which came after Patch Tuesday. Whether this is due to the increased usage and thus data collection of their products with more folks remote and an increase in vulnerability research, the uptick in releases shows promise to Adobe's approach to product security. With a patch released every week from Adobe, it also shows that waiting until Patch Tuesday to research and deploy the updates could be leaving endpoints susceptible to known vulnerabilities. And seeing as a vulnerability can be weaponized on average within 7 days, it's definitely behoove you to keep on track and up to date to all your applications and third-party products and their security releases. Finally, Mozilla provided security updates a little bit earlier, about 2 weeks ago in July. Firefox 79 was pushed out, Firefox 68 ESR and 78 ESR, as well as Thunderbird 68 and 78. There's also a small possibility that we're hearing of a minor security update coming for these applications in the coming week, so be on the lookout for that. 3 bugs fixed in this update: CVE 2020 15652, 6514, and 15655 are rated high and definitely worth patching now. CVE 6514 is a bug found by well-known Google bug hunter Natalie Silvanovich, and it's described as a WebRTC data channel leaked internal address to peer vulnerability, meaning that a malicious actor could trick your user into revealing information just by them accessing a malicious audio or video file. It's a unique attack vector. But overall, this is business as usual for Mozilla. If you haven't upgraded to the latest versions of these applications, note that it's been over 2 weeks. And just as I said in the last slide, the average time to weaponization is 7 days. It's a lot of information for everybody to take in. I do want to make sure that you all know that you will be getting this recording, but as well as that, if you go to the Automox blog, we have a full breakdown of all of this, as well as an index of all the vulnerabilities from Adobe, Firefox, or Adobe, Mozilla, and Windows available for you to read. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Nick, and he's going to give you a quick little demo. Nick, you ready?
Yes, I am here. Let me share my screen real quick. All right. So this demo is not actually of a worklet. It's of a script that uses the Automox API. So it's not something you would put in as a worklet and run through Automox. It's a PowerShell script you would run on any Windows machine that makes API calls and does things in the console. So what we're going to show you is a common use case, which is on here, you'll see we have a couple devices in this console that are disconnected. Now, these could be old machines that I've reimaged and repurposed or have been retired. So I no longer want them in the console because I don't want to be billed for endpoints for machines that don't exist anymore. So if I click on last disconnected date, I can here select these 2 old ones and I can say remove device. And that's well and good for the use case where you've got just 2 devices that you want to remove. But what if it's 200 or 2000? You don't want to go through here and check this checkbox. Even page by page and doing select all would be a pain in the butt. So let us automate it. All right, so I'm switching over to the Automox community, which is where this script is posted and where you can download it. And I'm going to walk you through how it works and show you what modifications you need to make in there, because obviously you're going to need to put in your own API key as well as the org ID for your organization. So I'll show you where to find those. All right, so let's scroll down to the code itself. Let me walk you through it, or at least the important parts. All right, so we got a bunch of variables we declare up at the top. There's a place where we save logs just in case. First, we have to define the URL for the API call. We're defining which table we're pulling using the API, which is the servers. And then here are a couple places that you'll need to update before using this. One is the org ID, and that's where you would put in your org ID. And to get that, simply go to your console, go to the dashboard, and you'll see here up at the top, it's got O equals and then a number, 9237. So 9237 is the org ID for this particular org, and you will see this in any URL as you browse around the console. It's always going to have O equals 9237 amongst the other parameters you'll see on there. The next variable you're going to need to set is the API key. So this is your API key goes here. And to find that, you would go to settings in your console and then go to the keys tab. We just recently released an update to the API key management. It used to be each user had one API key and one only, and the only way to retire an API key was to delete the user. Obviously, that's not a good experience. You might want multiple API keys to differentiate multiple tasks and multiple users. And you might also want to expire those API keys either on a time frame or after there's been an accidental exposure of that API key. Say you accidentally showed it publicly or posted it somewhere, then that API key would no longer be useful. Hackers could use it if they found it. So you can retire that API key and no longer have to worry. So you would go in here, you would copy the API key you're going to use. You can see here each user has their own API key. So I would scroll down to mine, click the copy button, and then paste that into my script. Next variable just puts the org ID and the API key together to construct the API call URL. Next is the number of days that you want to set. So anything older than, in this case, 120 days, but you can set that to 1 or 50 or whatever you want. So anything that would be older than the number of days you set here will get deleted when you run this script. All right, the next part is just creating the URL to get the information out of Automox, which is basically a list of all the endpoints that you have installed on there. So we're getting the JSON back from that, and then we're converting that into a variable that we can then use. So from the setup section, now we're going into the operational section. So it's looping through all of the endpoints in the API language. They're called servers. Doesn't matter if they're an actual server or a desktop. That's just the language that the API call use. So for all of the servers that we have here, we're going to get the ID and the name. And then we're going to check the last disconnect time to find out when was the last time this device was seen. Now, if there is no last disconnect time, it means that the device is currently connected. But if it has been disconnected, then last disconnect time is the date and timestamp of the last time this device was seen by Automox. So then we're doing some calculations here to look at the last disconnect time and turn that into a number of days. And then when we find that the number of days it's been disconnected is greater than the variable we set up the top, we're going to go ahead and delete that server or that endpoint automatically from the console. Now, there's a couple things that you can also edit in the script if you're running it for the first time, just to test things out. So I have a commented out section that basically just lists out all of your servers as it loops through them. So that line is here where it says, sorry, dogs are barking. So here where it says echo and then a bunch of stuff, this is a list of all of the devices. So if you uncomment this by removing the hash symbol, then it will show you output so that you can just double check that the math is right and it's not saying that there are devices disconnected that aren't. And then the other thing you can do the first time you run this is you can comment out the actual deletion portion. So you can comment out this line where it says del response equals invoke web request. So this is the line where it actually sends the deletion command. So if you just want to run this to see what would be deleted, to make sure that you're not going to accidentally delete all of your endpoints and then spend the rest of the day reinstalling them, you can comment this line out. All right, so let's see this in action. So So I have set up this script.ps1, delete old.ps1 on this Windows machine, and I'm going to run it using PowerShell. And I have uncommented the line that shows all of the endpoints. So you can see here, it's listing out all of the endpoints I have in this system, and days disconnected here says 0 for all of these because they're currently connected. And then we have this one device here, AX test, and it's got a number of days disconnected of 76 and change. And I had set the number of days in my script to 70. So it says successfully deleted server. I have commented out the deletion line. So this is just a demo of what would be deleted. And then same thing for this Falcon API 1. It says successfully deleted. Now you'll note that if I go back to the console and look at the devices, they're still showing in here because I had commented out the deletion line. I'm going to remove that and actually do the deletion. So let me bring up my script. So here's the commented out line. I'm going to remove that and save it. And then I'm going to run the script again. So now it should have deleted. So moment of truth, let's go over to the devices tab and refresh that. All right, and you'll see the AX test and the Falcon API 1 are now gone. So they were automatically removed, excuse me, by the script. And you can run this for 2 devices, 10 devices, 500, and it will remove them all automatically and save you a lot of hassle. You could also set this to run as a scheduled task. So maybe once a month, it would go through and remove any devices that are older than X number of days. All right, let me pause real quick and see if there's any questions specifically about the script.
Yeah, William just asked a really great one. If endpoints are removed from the admin console, but the agents are still running in the endpoints, they should be re-registered again, correct?
Actually, what happens if you remove an endpoint that isn't disconnected is that sends a command to the device to uninstall the agent on that device. So if I were to check this checkbox and then click remove device here, it sends one last final goodbye command down to the endpoint saying uninstall yourself. And doing this before you re-image a device is a good practice, but it's often one that we forget. You know, you're re-imaging a machine, you just wipe it, you put the new image on there, you hand it out to an employee, but you forgot to go in and remove it from Automox first. So that's where this script comes in handy to go and clean up those old devices that have been repurposed that you might have forgotten to uninstall through the console. But yeah, good question. Let's see if there's any others. Not specifically related to the script, so we can save those for the general Q&A portion. But I will hand things back over to you, Richard.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nick. Get back onto my presentation. Now for the general Q&A, really going on another one from in there. Is Automox able to handle uninstall Office 2016 and then deploy Office 2019? Nick, you and I were actually just talking about this yesterday.
Uninstalling and reinstalling. Let me pull up the question real quick.
It was uninstall Office 2016, but basically what's being asked is, and I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit, but is it possible to uninstall an older version and then install the newest version of the software?
I think you would need to do that in 2 steps. I haven't uninstalled and reinstalled versions unless the Office 2019 installer can handle, you know, in place updates. But either way, you should be able to handle that either through the required software policy or through a worklet, whether it's a 1-step or a 2-step process to kick off the installation.
Yeah, it's a really great one. Alex actually asked a question that related to your demo. Any way to change this to delete after X days and if it's a duplicate?
I don't believe so, because I think the fact that it's a duplicate means that it would show in there as the exact same device just listed twice. So if we send a deletion command, it would probably remove both of them. But I would have to double check that with the support folks to see if that's the case. In general, if you are seeing duplicates, it's because typically people have made a gold image and they haven't deregistered the agent before using that image and imaging a bunch of machines. So they all would show the same internal ID on the Automox side. We do have a KB in the works on best practices for doing that to show you exactly how to walk through setting up your image so you won't get duplicates. But in general, the best way to handle duplicates, if you do get them through whatever means, is to contact support, and they can go in there and clean that up for you so that you don't have to go in there and tinker with it yourself.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. Another great, wow, holy crap. You guys are all asking some really good questions. Excited to answer these. Another one, does multi-factor authentication exist as a login feature for the Automox console currently? If no, are there plans to add this?
Yes, so we do have two-factor authentication. You can either authenticate via email or via your favorite authenticator app like Google Authenticator. You would go into the settings in the console and then go to the, hold on, let me pull it up so I'm telling you the right tab. So we go into settings and then go into security, and then you'll see two-factor authentication for email and for mobile authenticator apps.
Awesome. Great. New to Automox, hey, welcome. And in my demo period, can policies be inherited from a parent group?
That is a good question.
That's
I
a
don't
really good
actually know the
question.
answer. I think that parent and child groups are just for the purposes of organizing devices, but I would have to test that out to see if a policy gets inherited from parent to child. I don't think so. I think you explicitly have to connect it, but let me test it out real quick. Actually, why don't we parking lot that one, and I'll answer it on the community afterwards.
Yeah, we're gonna, Michael, what we'll do is if you sign up for Automox Alive, we'll include a link to the community in our follow-up email. Just make sure you know where to go. It's a free community. Please sign up. You can go chat with Nick all day, every day. It makes him happy. But he'll dig into that a little bit more with you. Another question. I'm going to pop over the chat one. For the admin console, we are not able to show servers which have not been reporting for X number of days, correct? Felix, could you give a little bit more information on that?
You should be able to do that from the devices tab. So if you go to your devices tab and look at the last disconnected column, you can sort by that one. So it doesn't actually filter by X number of days, which is why we have the script, but you can at least sort by that and then scroll down the list and find the point where it's more than X number of days and just delete everything above that line if you want to.
Yeah. Is there a way to export the software list? I'm assuming you're talking about inventory, David. Is that, hopefully that's correct. Nick, I don't think we have the export ability, but we can do it through API, right?
Correct. Yeah, so you can export it from the software page.
Yeah.
That would be a nice addition to have there, so we might add that at some point. But yeah, you can do it through an API call.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for that. Is there a way to review the existing evaluation codes and remediation codes for existing patches or worklets? If we can review existing evaluation codes or remediation codes for existing worklets, we can create our own custom codes, correct? William, yes, that's actually the whole purpose of worklets. On the Automox Alive community, we have a section of community built and internally built worklets for you to use at any time. So you can go in and see how someone has written one, maybe modify it for yourself, or even write your own. Nick, did you do a webinar on worklet creation?
I do, and that's on the community. So search for Worklet webinar, and you should be able to find the recording of that. Steps you through kind of basic first time using a worklet and how that works and how to grab the code from the community and put it into your console.
And I realized I missed that opportunity to explain what a worklet is. So an Automox worklet is a feature extensibility capability that allows you, the IT admin or the admin within Automox, to automate and deploy out scripts, as you saw Nick do, in a group in within groups or on an individual basis. And so you could do everything from enforcing local policies to deploying software to even changing backgrounds. And we've seen some really creative use cases of this. If say you're setting up a security protocol where you want to deploy out canary tokens, you can do that with the worklets and deploy the canary tokens out to everybody. You can onboard employees, you can offboard employees, and Nick and I are actually working on that kind of use case for everybody. But what it is basically it's giving you the capability to automate some of those repetitive tasks that you can script. And the easiest way to think about, well, can I worklet this, is if you can script it through PowerShell or Bash, you can worklet it. And that's a great thing about it. So definitely check out the community if you're really interested in that. See what you can do. If you're writing one yourself, we'd love to see it. Share it out with other people. And Nick is there to help out if you have any questions. Just promoting.
And just to interject, one of our community members did test out the policy inheritance for children, parent-child groups, and it does not inherit. So if you want a policy to apply to both the parent and the child group, you have to explicitly connect it to both of them. But you know, that's how it's designed. So you can connect any policy to multiple groups, whether they're related or not.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Another great question. Is there a document or list we can get which tells us which are the critical updates that we need to install ASAP? Yes. Carlos, one of the easiest ways to do it is to go to our live index on the Automox blog. We publish that within minutes of the Microsoft updates being released. You're able to access that and see all the vulnerabilities that are there. If there is something that is highlighted, we make sure that we write about that and put it out. In case of a 0-day that is exploited, that's something that's very worrisome, like say a CVE or CVSS of 10, you will receive a notification from us directly. Other than that, there are other areas that you can look on. Of course, patchtuesdaydashboard.com is one of our favorite places. It's not owned by us, not a sponsor, but it's a great resource as well. Hopefully, it helps you out. But as soon as the patches are available within Microsoft, you're able to access them from the Automox console. Next
And
question.
I posted the link as the answer to your question, Carlos, to this month's blog with all of the breakdowns of which ones are critical to update.
Thanks so much, Nick. Is there a way to prioritize the updates based if they are used already in 0-day attacks? Is there like a report of those updates in the console?
I think the only thing we can do it is based on the score, and whether it's already in use is part of that score. So probably the best thing to do is go off of the CVSS score, because they will increase that score if it's in active use. But there's no way explicitly within the console to specify that. So you would have to go through and see which ones their CVSS pages say it's already exploited or not, and then make your decisions based on that.
Well, let's be careful. Remember, one of the exploited vulnerabilities this month only had a CVSS of 5.3. So definitely, if there's something that's a 9 or a 10, definitely get that taken care of. But there's nowhere in our console right now that's doing that. But that's a really good idea. We should pass that over to Ariel and see if she can build that into our next version. When using worklets to deploy software, the payload software would need to be located in my environment, or do you need the location for need to have a location for customers?
So for software deployment, you actually upload the payload to the console when you create either a required software policy to do deployment, or if you do deployment via worklet. So that gets stored in AWS in our instance there. And then when the worklet runs, it pushes that executable or MSI down from the console to the endpoint before it runs it. So you don't have to worry about managing, storing it elsewhere.
Yeah. Thank you. How soon is a public release of a Windows 10 cumulative update available to push out within Automox?
Generally, fairly quickly. I'm not sure exactly how often our severity importer runs, but I mean, whenever those cumulative updates come out on Patch Tuesday, we make sure we're sitting by the feed waiting for those to be available, and then we make sure that the importer has pulled them in. So, definitely within 30 minutes or so should be.
Yeah, I think 30 minutes is the maximum we've seen. Just depends on the number that we've seen. Remember, this is the the number of patches coming out has been increasing. So it's put a little bit of a, used to be we'd see like average of 40 to 70. Now, since COVID has pushed everyone to go remote since March, we've had over 100 patches from Microsoft every single month. So, but even this month was pretty quick. So it's within a time frame. So it's not like you have to wait until today. It's within an hour. Is there a way to set up a policy to create groups for endpoints like server group, Mac group, or and Win10 group?
You're talking about creating groups in the console. If so, I don't think there's any way to automate it outside of the API. So you can use the API to do everything you can do in the console, whether it's creating groups or moving devices into groups. So that would probably be your best bet if you're wanting to automate that setup. For instance, say you're an MSP and you're wanting to set up the same groups across 10 different clients. You could create a script to do that, and then you just change the org ID and the API key each time you run it to set up all those initial groups for a new client.
Thanks. What's a good resource to be notified or learn about the elevation of the criticality? You mentioned the 2020 1472 elevated to a 10 last night. Just check the blog the week of the patch Tuesday. Honestly, there's not much information as to why, Andy. And we're using our resources here internally to reach out to Microsoft through our connections there to see what their reasoning is. Look for something coming out hopefully soon. If we can get an answer on that, we'll update our blog on it. But typically what Microsoft will do is they have their own security blog as well. If something gets escalated like that, they will usually write something about it. But again, this happened late last night. No news came out about it. It kind of caught many of us by surprise.
Yeah, and I actually caught this one by looking in the sysadmin subreddit, and somebody had posted about it there. That's one of the fastest places for stuff to surface, whether it's a bad patch or a patch that's broken something. Typically that's where I'll see it first, and then it spreads out from there to all the other places like our community and Spiceworks and other online online discussion groups.
What we'll do is I think in the next couple of weeks, I'll write a blog on resources to use other than us, of course. We want you to be using us, but other resources that you can use to stay on top of patches and everything like that. So I'll write that. We'll make sure that gets out to everybody. Is there an optional backup for existing policy and audit log for change, modification, and deletion of policy?
There is not, but that is a common request, and that's something that's on our roadmap. Especially in situations where you have multiple admins, you want to see, who made what changes to what policies when, especially if something's broken, so you can figure out when it happened. But yeah, that's something you can go vote for on our product board feature request section. So that's got a listing of a bunch of the things that people have requested and where they are in the process of being evaluated. And that allows you to go and vote and say, hey, this one's really important to me. Build this one first.
That's awesome. And this is going to be the last question. What's the best way to group endpoints? Manually move endpoints into a group is painful. Yeah, we hear your pain.
Yeah, so we definitely need to build a better UI for that. Sounds a bit repetitive, but again, the API is your friend. So if you need to move a whole lot of devices from one group to another, you can do that. We do have the ability to, sort by various criteria on the devices page and do select all, page by page if you're moving devices. But if it's, on the order of hundreds or thousands, you're probably going to want to look at the API for that.
Yeah, awesome. Y'all, some of the best questions we've had on a Patch Tuesday. Thank you so much for all those. If you have any other questions that we didn't answer, the email that you got spamming you about this, inviting you to this webinar came from my email address. Go ahead and reply back to me. I'll answer it. If I don't have the answer, I'll pass it on to the right person that does. You can also reach out to us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Spiceworks, or even the Automox Live community. You can go bother Nick over there. We're here to answer all your questions. Or if you're in the console, the little chat button down in the bottom right, you can go ahead and chat with our support team. We're here to help. We're here to answer. We're here to keep you secure. Finally, let's do the giveaway. Remember, I'm giving away this Connecticut Raspberry Pi 4 4GB starter kit. We have done a randomizer. Andy Scornia, apologize if I have just ruined your last name. Andy, you have won this kit. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending on this one. Andy, be sure to reach out to us directly, privately, and we'll get you get your mailing address and get this mailed out to you.
One note, Andy was the
Yes.
person who took it upon himself to test out the policy inheritance from parent groups. So your good karma in helping us out with that must have influenced the random number generator somehow.
Thanks, Andy. We appreciate that. Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for joining us for the August 2020 Patch Tuesday breakdown. My name is Rich Malik. Thank you so much. Nick, say goodbye to the beautiful people.
Goodbye, beautiful people. Looking forward to seeing you next month.
Have a great day.